Hey world, what up? So the NBA season's coming to abyss within the last 13, 14 games or so. And I want to check and position myself over into the Eastern Conference, especially looking at the quote unquote contending teams out there and who pretty much has a chance to quote unquote take down the Boston Celtics to represent the 2025 NBA Eastern Conference Finals Championship. And predictions within the beginning of the season, especially for most of us, my position was I expected the teams to be alongside the hierarchy of the Boston Celtics, or maybe even a tier below, were for the New York Knicks, with them acquiring Mikal Bridges as well as Karl Anthony Towns within the offseason. Another team I did expect was the Philadelphia 76ers. Barring any injuries, I did expect them to be a top three seed in the Eastern Conference. Now, that's another conversation right now as they are going through dismantles, injuries, toxicity, and more eternal fluctuations on that side. Middle of the pack teams right below, I did also expect the Orlando Magic and the Indiana Pacers to be right there knocking. I did not expect Miami or Milwaukee to be within that region or horizon, so they were out of the picture. So basically, what I'm saying is I expected pretty much three teams to potentially come out of the Eastern Conference: the Boston Celtics, the New York Knicks, and the Philadelphia 76ers. Now we're in a position to where we're around 17 games or so in the NBA, around a month and a half, and we've seen that one of the most surprising teams and a potential contender is going to be over in the Eastern Conference in Ohio, which is the Cleveland Cavaliers, sitting at a 16-1 record. Now, they did go 15-0. They lost against Boston, losing by three or so at Boston. Still a close game within that. Darius Garland did not show up that game. But then they were able to recover, bounce back at home against if I'm not mistaken, it was either the Pelicans or the Chicago Bulls in that blowout, which Ty Jerome had. I think he had like 27 points in the first half, hitting seven threes or so. So right now, the Cleveland Cavaliers are finally getting some heatway in the NBA landscape to where the NBA pundits and media are forced, yes, they're forced to finally at least mention them once in a while. A team other than LeBron James, Steph Curry, and whatnot. But kudos to the Cleveland Cavaliers sitting at the best record in the NBA. They're at 3 games ahead of the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference, which Boston still has Kristaps Porzingis injured. So let's see whenever he comes back if they make that push. But Cleveland's one of those teams that every year in the NBA, there's pretty much a team out of the East or the West that you pretty much think they'll be middle of the pack in their conference, right? Like around a fourth or a sixth seed. But then our expectations are usually blown when that team usually takes on the number one seed in the NBA or the number one seed in the respective conference. Such examples like the 2021 Utah Jazz, led by Donovan Mitchell, to which they were the number one seed in the Western Conference. But then they did lose in the second round to the Phoenix Suns. Or my bad, they lost to the second round to the LA Clippers with Kawhi Leonard out. Another team, for example, is the 2015 Atlanta Hawks, led by their quote unquote Big Four that made the All Star game, which you had Al Horford, Paul Millsap, Jeff Teague, Kyle Korver, and Damari Carroll. And then there's a couple other teams out throughout history I'll probably mention here in a bit. But are the Cleveland Cavaliers contenders? We'll talk a little more.
I think that when you look at them right now at 15-0, when you look at Kenny Atkinson and the job that he is doing, and I think that David Aldridge wrote an outstanding column on him and his transitioning from being an assistant coach in Golden State under Steve Kerr to what he's brought to the Cleveland Cavaliers organization was a great column. No doubt, give him props.
Like I mentioned before, Kenny Atkinson's one of the most underrated coaches in the league. Remember he was with the Brooklyn Nets for around 3 to 4 seasons before they got Katie and Kyrie. Actually, they did get Katie and Kyrie in 2020, but after that season, they let him go to get Steve Nash because KD and Kyrie Irving wanted to pretty much do whatever the heck they wanted. But before that, in the 2019 NBA season, the six-seeded Brooklyn Nets came out of nowhere. They were utilizing their team as D'Angelo Russell was an all-star. They had Jared Dudley even making a push off their bench. Some other players along that. They took the Philadelphia 76ers, I believe, around 6 games or so. But Kenny Atkinson has made a good push as a head coach. He took 3 years as an assistant over to Golden State, which they did win one NBA championship within 2022 or so. And then now he's finally back in the league as a head coach. So it's about time that Kenny Atkinson finally got a head coaching gig. Kudos.
But in the same breath, I also think that getting the ball in the hands more of Evan Mobley, who's shooting better, who's shooting better from three-point range than he has in the past, who's averaging more points per game than he has at about 18 a game, taking nearly 13 shots a game. Garland and Donovan Mitchell are averaging about 46 points a game combined. But here's what I'm looking at right here, guys. The Cleveland Cavaliers are number one in points per game, offensive efficiency, field goal percentage shooting, and three-point percentage shooting. And they've got about 6 different dudes averaging double digits. Also, only 2 of their players are averaging 30 minutes per game. And one of them is Donovan Mitchell, of course. 10 players are playing at least 17 minutes per game.
And their three ball has been impeccable this season. I mean, the offense that Kenny Atkinson is acquiring within this team, you got to give it credits to. Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell are pretty much shooting around 40 to 42% from three as of right now. Evan Mobley's increased this to 38. Ty Jerome, he's in the 50s if I'm not mistaken, within his three-point shooting. They have some offensive threats finally out there, and they do have length, which I do like about this team. I do like their traditional front court of a power forward and center, which you do have Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, that they're defensive-minded bigs, kind of like back in the early 2000s. But Evan Mobley's now pushing out to shoot from the perimeter, so which is good with Jarrett Allen. If he can remain healthy, which was not in the NBA playoffs last season, they could have made some trouble for the Boston Celtics. Not said they would have won the series, but I thought that series was at least going 6 or 7 last year, fully healthy.
You're talking about cats having fresh legs. They've got athleticism. They defend. They can shoot the basketball. And, oh, by the way, in case y'all missed it, Donovan Mitchell can ball. And so we all know this. And I think when you take that into consideration, the Boston Celtics with Porzingis is an entirely different animal. And I get that. And I'm not putting them above the Celtics. But when you think about the rest of the Eastern Conference, the Knicks, the Sixers, et cetera, the Cleveland Cavaliers are right there.
Yeah, but if I'm looking at the East as of right now, to pretty much represent the East, like I mentioned, right now it's looking like Boston as a heavy favorite, Cleveland pretty much in that second tier, New York's finally climbing up. I think Orlando Magic has another layer that they can peel off. But basically, it's looking like a projection of a Cleveland Cavaliers, Boston Celtics Eastern Conference Finals. Depending if Cleveland plays New York in that second round, that's going to be a 7-game series. That can kind of go either way. But right now, Cleveland looks like the more formidable team. And it's about time that Donovan Mitchell finally gets a conference finals appearance. I mean, he's been in the league around 8 to 9 years. He's been with the Utah Jazz for around 5 seasons or so, 5 or 6 seasons. Cleveland on his third. And Donovan Mitchell's been to the second round, I believe, like only twice. I remember when they beat the Oklahoma City Thunder when Donovan Mitchell was a rookie. And then you had Russell Westbrook, Carmelo Anthony, and then you had Paul George on that team, which the Thunder had heavy aspirations that season. But Donovan Mitchell and the crew went up 3-1, and I believe they closed that series out in 5 or 6. I believe 6 back in Utah when they had those new jerseys. And then Donovan Mitchell, the next appearance, made it when they were the number 1 seed, and they lost to the LA Clippers in the second round of 6 games, which people were expecting a Phoenix Suns Utah Jazz conference finals. But that did not happen. And then you got to remember 2020 in the bubble, the number 3 Denver Nuggets went against the number 6 Utah Jazz, and the Jazz went up 3-1 in that series, which we were stunned. But then that's when the Denver Nuggets went back-to-back 3-1 series, overcoming them. So Donovan Mitchell, he's had his moments in the playoffs, but do we fully trust him to take you to the promised land? No. Is he still learning? Sure. He is cranking up another level. He is a superstar in this game. Let me repeat myself. Donovan Mitchell is a superstar in this game, but not a tier 1 superstar, but he's in that tier 2. He's at 28 years of age in his prime, so this is his moment with the new head coach, a healthy crew. They should make a conference finals appearance.
I think they're going to have something to say about the outcome in the Eastern Conference.
You know what, Stephen? I agree with you. And look,
I mean, when is there one time that Kendrick Perkins has not huffed and puffed before his take on ESPN?
I'm not putting them above the Boston Celtics either right now. But I will say this: when it comes down to them being a legit title contender, They check all boxes. Is no team in the league outside of the Boston Celtics that could beat the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I'm talking about in the Western Conference as well, right? When you look at the play of Evan Mobley, which you just alluded to, the reason that it's working.
Kendrick Perkins, do not even worry about any team in the Western Conference going against the Cavs because, like I mentioned before, no team in the East is winning a championship this season. It's going to be a team in the Western Conference for this year. So there's too many question marks in the Eastern Conference as it is. There's a lot of teams in the West who don't have those question marks that are pretty much dominant to come out of the West, let alone represent a championship for 2025.
It's because of his ability to stretch the floor down and knock down the three. And I'm talking about that tandem between him and Jared Allen. I want to show some love to Darius Garland right now. That man last year, what he went through, right? His eye situation, jaw, the losing his grandmother last season. He went through a lot. It was times I heard him on reports where he had basically given up on the game of basketball. So to see him back playing at a high level and back at a safe place, averaging 21 points a game, shooting almost 54% from the field, 7 assists, is great for the Cavs. All they have to do is stay the course. The last thing I will say, this team needs to make sure that they keep home court advantage throughout the playoffs. Make Cleveland a dangerous place for any opponent to walk into and know that it's going.
Darius Garland's giving around 21 and 8, and those are pretty much consistent with his yearly numbers that he did get an All-Star appearance with Cleveland. So he's in a good spot right now. He's 24 years of age. He's very young. They're in a good spot where they're at with Cleveland.
Going to be hard as hell for them to win the game in Cleveland, but they are worthy title contenders.
And you got to remember, within the 16 wins this NBA season, they've beaten very formidable teams out there. I mean, they've taken down the New York Knicks. They beat the LA Lakers. Even though Milwaukee's in a frenzy and they're climbing their way up, they beat Milwaukee twice. They did take a W against the Golden State Warriors and the Philadelphia 76ers. And then their only loss was to the Boston Celtics. So they're going to play Boston again back in the beginning of December. So I got my eye on that one to see if they can take Boston, especially if they're going to be playing at home within that series. But within that, Cleveland's in a great position right now. Their projections, I would say, Eastern Conference Finals appearance, and pretty much around at least 63 wins this season, projection-wise. Now, some people are saying they could reach the potentially high 60s, low 70s. I'm not going to go that quick so far, but we'll see.
I agree with everything you guys said. Last year, for whatever reason, it didn't seem like this backcourt could play together. Donovan Mitchell dominated the basketball. Garland seemed to be just hanging around on the perimeter. But now they found a way to coexist. Give Kenny Atkinson credit for finding ways to get these guys ingratiated in the offense while they're both on the floor. One doesn't need to be out in order for them to do their job. They got those two bigs that can command the paint, that can eat you up on the offensive glass. They do a tremendous job of defending. You got two 7-footers, so nothing is cheap at the rim. They shoot the ball extremely well. Evan Mobley has just kept expanding his game offensively. We know he kind of reminds you of an Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis was a defensive guy coming out, and he still is. He still is a preeminent defensive player. But now he's expanded his offensive game where he's averaging 30 and 12, and he's a consistent 25 and 10 guy. And so that's what Evan Mobley.
Real quick, I've never been the biggest fan of JB Bickerstaff. He's been the head coach of the Cavs, I believe, since 2020 or so. He had around 4 seasons with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and especially 2 years ago, they were around a 4th seed, the first season for Donovan Mitchell. And I remember when they lost that first-round series against the New York Knicks in 5 games. That was a clear embarrassment. I've never been fond of him as a head coach. Now, as of right now, I know he's the head coach for the Detroit Pistons, which the Pistons right now been pretty surprising within the season, especially to a good start for them at least, a 7-9. They're a 6 seed. The East is weak. It is what it is, but I've never been too fond of the head coach over there. But Kenny Atkinson, night and day.
potentially be. But I like this team. I like the way they're playing. 15-0. I don't think anybody saw this coming out of the gate. But the Boston Celtics are a different animal. They are the defending champs with something to prove. They know in order for them to be thought of as one of these great teams, they need to win multiple championships and they need to win them quick. And the best way to do that is to go back and repeat. And now you're going to have everybody's undivided attention and you're going to have people asking, well, Stephen A., how many do you think?
Listen to me, the Boston Celtics are not repeating an NBA championship this season. I'll repeat myself. The Boston Celtics are not going to repeat as NBA champions. Could they potentially represent the Eastern Conference? Sure. I expect either them, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the New York Knicks, one of those three, to represent the East as of right now. I don't see any teams like the Magic, the Heat, the Pacers, the Bucks, or 76ers, and maybe two out of those teams won't even make the playoffs to begin with. The East is weak as it is. There's not any true big dominant teams in the Eastern Conference to where I see them as the hierarchy above the NBA league. Last season was the Boston Celtics. They had around 7 to 9 games above everyone else, and it felt like their year. Knowing the East is going to be their year. Looks like as of right now, trending-wise, potentially Cleveland or Boston to make a finals appearance. But in the Western Conference, there's more formidable teams out there in that West bloodbath.
Can they win? Because I think Jaylen Brown is 27, JT is 26, so this is a fairly young team. Obviously, for Porzingis, health is the main issue. Al Horford is getting on up there in age, but you look at Derek White and you look at what they have around them. This team, Boston, I still think Boston is the best team in the league, though.
Boston is the best team in the league, particularly when Porzingis comes back. And let's not dismiss Oklahoma City, Big Perk, because Isaiah.
And side note, I pretty much expect Al Horford for the Boston Celtics. He's got 1 year left, around $9 to $10 million. He's at 38 years of age. He's already won a chip. Don't be surprised if Al Horford retires after this season, regardless if they win a championship or not. Could he play another season or two with, the mid-level exception, a veteran minimum? Sure, but I pretty much could expect him to retire.
Hartstein eventually will be back. Chet Holmgren eventually will be back. And with Shea Gilgeous and the rest of the crew, I think they'll have something to say. So I'm not going to go as far as to say Cleveland's the second best team in the entire NBA. I'm going to say they're coming. I'm going to say they'll.
Well, like I said, Stephen A., and this was around a month or two ago before the season started, my predictions beginning the season was for the Boston Celtics and the Oklahoma City Thunder to reach the NBA Finals to go against one another. I did have my favorites to be the Oklahoma City Thunder beating the Celtics in 6 games. Now, who's going to have home court? That's up in the air. But I still have the Oklahoma City Thunder as my favorites to win the NBA championship if I've not relayed that within the past couple of weeks. I see no reason why they wouldn't. They're the only team I have 0 question marks. Now, if they can bring another big, that's all they pretty much need on their side and stay healthy. Chet's out for 2 months or so. He'll be back. They'll be fine. They still have enough deep team and roster to where they can win you regular season games and at least get a top 2 seed in the West. But yeah, right now I have the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'm going to stick where I'm at. Knowing the East scares me to win the championship or take it on. And the NBA usually goes back and forth when it comes to the East versus West. We saw with the starting with 2020, we saw with the LA Lakers in the Western Conference. 2021 jumped over to the Milwaukee Bucks in the East. Then back in 2022, 2023, back in the Western Conference with the Warriors and the Nuggets. 24 the East. And 2025, it's looking like as of right now, someone in the Western Conference. As of right now, I do have the Oklahoma City Thunder. Let's see the consistency of the Golden State Warriors. The Lakers have been the most surprising, at least on my end, sitting at the 3rd seed at 10-4. Could this be a potential LA Lakers, LeBron James going against the Cleveland Cavaliers for a championship, just like he did against his old team, the Miami Heat, in 2020? Who knows?
Legitimate bona fide threat within the Eastern Conference. I'm going to say it wouldn't surprise me at all if the Eastern Conference came down to them and the Boston Celtics as opposed to the Knicks and the Boston Celtics. It remains to be seen. We'll talk.
Ain't no Knicks. Stop saying the Knicks.
Hold on. Well, excuse me.
I'm not going to say the Knicks as they've not addressed, number one, their bench. Mitchell Robinson's injured, and they're not bringing in any backup centers within their team. This 7-man rotation is not going to work. Someone's going to get injured and get flamed out, going around 40 to 45 minutes per game. It's the same Tom Thibodeau effect. And we haven't seen Tom Thibodeau make a conference finals appearance since back in 2011 with MVP Derrick Rose. Do I expect anything different right now? Probably not. But if the Knicks could address their bench, either trade Mitchell Robinson and get another big or so, then the Knicks are in a better position. Karl-Anthony Towns does not need to play the starting five. He needs to be a starting four. They need to move Josh Hart to the bench as a sixth man, and then bring in either Mitchell Robinson healthy or a true center within the team. Maybe a Jonas Valanciunas, maybe, potential like a Steven Adams, maybe a Clint Capella, something along those lines.
Once Mitchell Robinson comes back, Cat can get moved from the center position, play his natural position with his shooting ability, with Jalen Brunson.
Again, even if they do have Mitchell Robinson back in the next month or so, you need to sign another center. Jericho Sims is not going to get it done as a young guy. Either sign Dwight Howard, get JaVale McGee, get someone out there.
And with the way that Tom Thibodeau will have them playing defense as the season progresses, Shannon, you better fall back and recognize that the New York Knicks may have something to say about the Eastern Conference. Watch your mouth. But let me get to a bigger point. Let me get to a bigger point. In all seriousness, Kenny Atkinson. Here's why I want to bring up that name. Put Big Perk and Shannon up on the screen, please, when I'm talking, because I want to see them when I bring this up. Kenny Atkinson was a head coach before. Kenny Atkinson did take the Nets to the playoff for a 42-40 record. Then that second year he was let go. Remember, he was supposed to, it was KD and Kyrie that came. But
what did I say, Stephen A? What did I say? Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving wanted a head coach that they can do whatever the heck wanted with. They're not going to respect, and they can play the ISO basketball. And look what happened back in the NBA playoffs in 2021. Credit where credit's due. Even though when Kyrie was hurt, you had Harden and KD. They did make it to the second round of the playoffs in 7 games against the Bucks. And that ISO basketball was pretty much, KD was willing his team to win 40, 50-point games. But Steve Nash was on his Darvin Ham. He had no idea how to coach his team. He couldn't coach. He couldn't be that alpha dog to where he could lead this team. And he was relying on his ISO star players. It is what it is. Kenny Atkinson, if Kenny Atkinson was the coach for that team, I believe the Brooklyn Nets, regardless of injury, they would have won that NBA championship 2021.
KD was out the whole first year because he was recovering from his Achilles. And Kyrie had only played 20 games. So he never.
And that Brooklyn Nets team actually did make the playoffs, if I remember correctly. But they were pushing KD to come back for the playoffs. He did not come back, which I'm glad he did not. And I believe they got swept to the Toronto Raptors, if I'm mistaken.
Really had a chance to show what he's showing now. Now, we could sit up there and say being on a Golden State bench with Steve Kerr no doubt helped because that's one of the greatest coaches of all time. Or we could say, what if he did have KD and Kyrie? He might have never needed to be on Golden State's bench.
Bingo. And plus with the Golden State, that was a good environment for him to be in, especially winning that championship. We've seen assistant coaches under Steve Kerr, they take on to new head coaching jobs and either they failed, they passed, but at least they got their shot. Luke Walton, whenever Steve Kerr was out for numerous games, Luke Walton was able to take on the reign there. Back with getting signed with the LA Lakers as a head coach. Mike Brown, he had those opportunities. Now he's the Sacramento Kings head coach. I'm probably forgetting another coach or two, but same thing with Kenny Atkinson. So he was really good to start off with. Now he had the Golden State Warriors era, so he's good where he's at.
Because they would have made some noise. If they came to a Game 7 of the Eastern Conference semifinals with Steve Nash as its coach, how come they couldn't do it with Kenny Atkinson? So let's remember.
They would have got it done with Kenny Atkinson, no doubt about it. But you got to remember, Kyrie and KD, they were too hard-headed. I think James Harden was more open to the idea, but Kyrie and KD was more isocentric, focusing mostly on themselves, to where they wanted a weak head coach, where they thought they had a super team they can get it done with. They didn't want to bow down to the masculine traditional principle. And it showed. It is what it is.
Remember that as well. And that's the point that I wanted to bring up.
All right, we're going to leave it off there. So the Cleveland Cavaliers, as of right now, have a great head coach situation. They have a foundation, a hierarchy, which everyone's stable. They know their roles. They're playing an offensive-centric, high-quality basketball, brand of basketball as of right now. And they're focused on retaining that number 1 seed and pretty much making a statement to go against the Boston Celtics, let alone these other teams like the Knicks, and so on and so forth. As of right now, the Cleveland Cavaliers should at least get a second-round appearance, playoff appearance. But if I had to project anything, they would be in the Eastern Conference Finals, most likely against the Boston Celtics. I still got to see what the New York Knicks are able to do with their rosters and come time series. But as of right now, Cleveland, I don't expect them to win an NBA championship. Could they make a finals appearance? Sure. But right now, I'm going to keep them within that Eastern Conference Finals flow, and for them to at least still keep the number 1 seed. But we'll see more within there. All right.